The morning sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as Maya Rodriguez stepped off the city bus, her worn sneakers hitting the pavement with a soft thud. She pulled her jacket tighter around her thin frame, the fabric showing signs of too many washes and not enough money for replacements. At 19, Maya carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned early that the world rarely offered second chances. She walked past the manicured lawns and pristine mailboxes of Elmwood Heights, a neighborhood that might as well have been on another planet compared to the cramped apartment she shared with her younger brother and sick mother. The houses here stood like monuments to success, their windows gleaming in the sunlight, their driveways occupied by cars that cost more than her family made in 2 years. Maya clutched the small piece of paper in her pocket, the address written in her careful handwriting. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, 1247 Maple Street. She had found the job listing on a community board at the local library, where she spent most of her free time studying for her GED and searching for work opportunities. Housekeeper wanted. No experience necessary. Must be reliable and trustworthy. The Whitmore mansion loomed before her, its red brick facade and white columns speaking of old money and established privilege. Maya had never seen a house so large. She counted at least 12 windows on the front face alone, each one probably bigger than her entire bedroom. The garden was immaculate, with roses that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and a fountain that tinkled softly in the center of a circular driveway. She pressed the brass doorbell, its chime echoing somewhere deep within the house. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal a woman in her early 50s, blonde hair, styled perfectly, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Yes. The woman's voice carried the practiced politeness of someone accustomed to dealing with service providers. I'm here about the housekeeping position, ma'am. Maya Rodriguez. She extended her hand, which the woman briefly shook with obvious reluctance. Oh yes, the girl from the phone. I'm Mrs. Whitmore. Colleen. Maya stepped into the foyer, her eyes widening despite her efforts to appear composed. The ceiling stretched up 2 stories, with a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. The marble floor gleamed under her feet, and she suddenly became conscious of every scuff on her shoes. This way, Mrs. Whitmore said, leading her through a hallway lined with oil paintings. The previous girl left rather suddenly. I need someone who can start immediately and work 5 days a week. The pay is $12 an hour, and I expect discretion and reliability above all else. Maya nodded, calculating quickly in her head. $12 an hour for 40 hours a week would be more money than she had ever earned. It would be enough to help with her mother's medical bills, enough to put food on the table consistently, maybe even enough to save a little for college courses. The house has 18 rooms, Mrs. Whitmore continued, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Kitchen, dining room, living areas, 5 bedrooms, for bathrooms, library, study, and my husband's office, which you're never to enter. The basement is off-limits as well. They entered the kitchen, which was larger than Maya's entire apartment. Granite countertops stretched along 3 walls, and stainless steel appliances gleamed under recessed lighting. Mrs. Whitmore opened a cabinet and pulled out a detailed list. Your daily duties, she said, handing Maya the paper. Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. You'll have a 30-minute lunch break. There are uniforms in the utility room, size small, I assume. Maya glanced down at herself and nodded. She had always been petite, a trait that had often made her seem younger and more vulnerable than she was. I should mention, Mrs. Whitmore added, her tone becoming more businesslike, we occasionally entertain important guests. Discretion is paramount. What you see and hear in this house stays in this house. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am. Completely understood. Good. My husband is Colonel James Whitmore. He's retired military, very particular about his privacy and his routine. He's usually in his office or the library when he's home. You'll rarely interact with him, which is for the best. Maya absorbed this information, filing it away. She had learned to read people quickly, a skill developed from years of navigating difficult situations. Mrs. Whitmore seemed like the type of person who valued appearance and status above all else. The mention of her husband's military rank wasn't casual. It was meant to establish hierarchy. "Can you start tomorrow?" Mrs. Whitmore asked. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank me yet. This is a trial period. 1 week. If you prove reliable and competent, we'll discuss a permanent arrangement." Maya left the Whitmore house with mixed feelings of excitement and nervousness. As she waited for the bus, she looked back at the imposing structure. Something about the place felt heavy, weighted with secrets she couldn't name. But a job was a job, and her family needed the money. The bus ride home took her through the gradual transition from wealth to poverty, from tree-lined streets to chain-link fences, from luxury cars to broken-down vehicles parked on cracked asphalt. By the time she reached her stop, the contrast felt like traveling through different worlds. Her apartment building was a 3-story brick structure that had seen better decades. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and cleaning chemicals, sounds of multiple families living in close quarters filtering through thin walls. Maya climbed to the second floor, her key turning in the lock of apartment 2B. "Maya, that you, Mija?" Her mother's voice came from the bedroom, weak but warm. "It's me, Mama." Maya hung her jacket on the back of a chair and went to check on her mother. Elena Rodriguez lay propped up against pillows, her once vibrant face now gaunt from months of illness. The medical bills had been overwhelming, even with the free clinic's help. Maya's father had left when the diagnosis came, unable to handle the financial and emotional pressure. "How did the interview go?" Elena asked, reaching for Maya's hand. "I got it, Mama. Start tomorrow. Good pay, nice family." Maya didn't mention her unease about the Whitmores. Her mother had enough to worry about. "That's wonderful, baby. You see, things are looking up." Maya smiled and kissed her mother's forehead, but privately she wondered if things were ever truly that simple. In her experience, opportunities that seemed too good to be true usually came with hidden costs. Her 12-year-old brother, Danny, burst through the front door, backpack sliding off his shoulder as he rushed to share the day's events. Maya listened with half an ear while preparing a simple dinner, her mind already planning for tomorrow. That evening, after Danny had finished his homework and their mother had taken her medication, Maya sat at the small kitchen table reviewing the list of duties Mrs. Whitmore had given her. The tasks seemed straightforward enough: dusting, vacuuming, cleaning bathrooms, organizing. She had been cleaning house for neighbors since she was 14, so the work itself didn't intimidate her. What troubled her was the emphasis on discretion, the mention of important guests, and the specific instruction to avoid the colonel's office and the basement. In her experience, when people were that specific about what was off-limits, there was usually a good reason. Maya shook her head, dismissing her concerns. She was probably overthinking things. Rich people were paranoid about their privacy. That was nothing new. She needed this job, and she was determined to make it work. She went to bed early, setting her alarm for 5:30 to give herself plenty of time to get ready and catch the early bus. As she lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the city night, Maya allowed herself to hope that this job might be the break her family needed. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly. Maya dressed carefully in her best jeans and a clean white shirt, planning to change into the provided uniform once she arrived. She caught the 6:15 bus, watching the city wake up through rain-streaked windows. The Whitmore house looked even more imposing in the dim morning light, its windows dark except for a few glowing on the first floor. Maya used the key Mrs. Whitmore had given her to enter through the side door, which led directly into a mudroom adjacent to the kitchen. The uniforms were hanging in the utility room as promised. Simple gray dresses with white collars, reminiscent of old-fashioned maid outfits, but modern in cut. Maya changed quickly, noting that the size small fit her perfectly. Someone had clearly assessed her measurements accurately. She found the cleaning supplies organized in a large closet, everything labeled and arranged with military precision. The vacuum cleaner was top of the line, and the cleaning products were all professional grade. Whatever else might be said about the Whitmores, they believed in having the right tools for the job. Maya began her first day by familiarizing herself with the layout of the house. The first floor contained a formal living room, dining room, kitchen, a casual family room, library, and what Mrs. Whitmore had referred to as her husband's office. The door to the office was closed, and Maya made note to steer clear of it. The second floor housed a master bedroom suite, 3 guest bedrooms, and 2 additional bathrooms. Everything was decorated in muted tones of cream, gold, and deep blue, with artwork that looked expensive and original. Family photographs were scarce, Maya noticed, and those that existed were formal portraits rather than candid family moments. She started with the guest bedrooms, working methodically through dusting, vacuuming, and organizing. The work was satisfying in its way. There was something peaceful about restoring order and cleanliness to beautiful spaces. Around 9 o'clock, she heard footsteps in the hallway below, followed by the sound of a door closing. Mrs. Whitmore's voice filtered up, speaking to someone on the phone about charity luncheon and the importance of proper seating arrangements. Maya continued her work, grateful that she seemed to be largely invisible to the family. It was in the library that she first sensed she was being watched. The feeling crept up her spine as she dusted the tall bookshelves, a prickling awareness that made her turn around. The library appeared empty, its leather chairs and polished tables arranged perfectly, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been observing her. She completed the room quickly and moved on to the family room, but the sensation lingered. When she went downstairs for lunch, Maya found a note from Mrs. Whitmore on the kitchen counter. Gone to tennis club. Back by 3 p.m. Lunch fixings in refrigerator. Maya made herself a simple sandwich and sat at the kitchen island, reviewing her progress for the day. She was ahead of schedule, which was good. The house was large but well organized, and most of the rooms appeared to be rarely used. As she ate, Maya found herself studying the family photographs that hung near the breakfast nook. Mrs. Whitmore appeared in several, always perfectly groomed, often standing beside a tall man with silver hair and military bearing who must be the colonel. But there were no children in any of the photos, no evidence of family gatherings or celebrations. The images felt staged like props in a display home rather than memories of a life lived together. Maya was returning to work when she heard it, a sound from somewhere deep in the house, like metal striking metal in a rhythmic pattern. It seemed to be coming from below, possibly from the basement she was forbidden to enter. She paused, listening, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The afternoon passed without incident. Mrs. Whitmore returned as promised, inspecting Maya's work with the thoroughness of someone conducting a military review. She seemed satisfied, offering only minor corrections about the arrangement of magazines and the angle of throw pillows. "You'll do," she said finally, which Maya interpreted as high praise coming from someone so clearly particular about details. As Maya changed back into her street clothes, she reflected on her first day. The work itself had been manageable, even pleasant. The house was beautiful, the pay was fair, and Mrs. Whitmore, while demanding, had been professional and clear in her expectations. But as she walked to the bus stop, Maya couldn't quite shake the feeling that she had only seen the surface of something much more complex. The house held secrets. She was certain of that. The question was whether those secrets would remain hidden, or whether her presence might somehow disturb whatever careful balance the Whitmores had constructed in their perfect, pristine world. The evening commute gave her time to process the day's experiences. She had a good job, probably the best she had ever been offered. Her family needed the income desperately. Whatever mysteries the Whitmore house might hold, they were none of her business as long as she did her work and minded her own affairs. Maya arrived home to find Danny struggling with algebra at the kitchen table and her mother feeling well enough to sit up and watch the evening news. The normalcy of their small apartment felt comforting after the strange grandeur of the Whitmore mansion. "How was your first day, Mija?" Elena asked. "Good, Mama. The lady seems nice enough, and the house is beautiful. I think this could work out well for us." As Maya helped Danny with his homework and prepared dinner, she made a conscious decision to focus on the positive aspects of her new job. She had been given an opportunity, and she intended to make the most of it, regardless of any unease she might feel about her employers. But later that night, as she lay in bed planning the next day's tasks, Maya found herself wondering about the sound she had heard from the basement, about the colonel she had never actually seen, and about why such a large house felt so empty of warmth or genuine life. She drifted off to sleep with questions she couldn't answer, unaware that her arrival at the Whitmore house had set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about justice, loyalty, and the price of keeping other people's secrets. Maya's second week at the Whitmore house brought a routine that felt both comfortable and strange. She had learned the rhythms of the household. Mrs. Whitmore left for various social engagements most mornings, returning in time to inspect Maya's work before the end of the day. The colonel remained largely invisible, though Maya occasionally heard his voice from behind the closed office door, speaking in clipped tones on what sounded like business calls. The house itself seemed to breathe around her as she worked, settling and creaking in ways that old houses do. But sometimes Maya caught sounds that didn't fit, muffled conversations from rooms that should have been empty, the faint hum of machinery from somewhere below her feet, and, once distinctly, the sound of a woman crying. That last sound had stopped Maya in her tracks as she cleaned the upstairs hallway. She had listened carefully, but when the crying didn't resume, she wondered if she had imagined it. Mrs. Whitmore certainly didn't seem the type to cry, and there were no other women in the household that Maya knew of. On Thursday of her second week, Maya was dusting the formal living room when she heard the front door open. She glanced up to see Mrs. Whitmore entering with a man Maya didn't recognize. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit, but something about his posture reminded her of soldiers she had seen in movies. "The colonel is expecting you," Mrs. Whitmore said to the visitor, her voice carrying an undertone Maya hadn't heard before. "You know where to find him." The man nodded and walked toward the back of the house, his footsteps purposeful and quiet. Maya continued dusting, but her attention was divided. There had been something in Mrs. Whitmore's tone, a deference she hadn't shown to any of the other visitors Maya had seen. 20 minutes later, Maya was organizing books in the library when she heard voices coming from somewhere below. The library shared a wall with what she assumed was the basement, and though she couldn't make out words, the tone of the conversation was intense. One voice was clearly the colonel's, deep and authoritative. The other belonged to the visitor. Maya tried to focus on her work, but something about the conversation felt important, even urgent. She found herself straining to hear, though she knew she was crossing a line she had promised not to cross. Then she heard a third voice, softer and definitely female. It wasn't Mrs. Whitmore. Maya would have recognized her crisp pronunciation anywhere. This voice was younger, with a slight accent Maya couldn't place. And underneath the words, she could hear something that made her stomach clench fear. Maya stepped away from the shared wall, her heart racing. Whatever was happening below wasn't her business. She had a job to do, a family to support, and no reason to get involved in her employer's private affairs. She forced herself to concentrate on alphabetizing the books, but her hands shook slightly as she worked. The voices stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of footsteps on what must have been basement stairs. Maya quickly moved to the other side of the library, pretending to dust a table near the window. Minutes later, the visitor walked past the library doorway, his expression grim. The front door opened and closed, and then the house returned to its usual quiet. That evening, Maya found herself distracted as she helped Danny with his homework. Her mother noticed her mood at dinner. "You look worried, Mija. Everything okay at work?" "Just tired, Mama. The house is bigger than I'm used to." Elena studied her daughter's face with the intuition that comes from years of single motherhood. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. We'll figure it out together." Maya forced a smile. "It's nothing, really. just adjusting to a new routine. But as she lay in bed that night, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the fear in that unknown woman's voice. She had grown up in neighborhoods where people minded their own business because getting involved often meant getting hurt. But she had also been raised by a mother who taught her that turning away from someone in trouble was sometimes the same as causing the trouble yourself. The next morning, Maya arrived at work determined to focus solely on her duties. She would clean the assigned rooms, do her job well, and stop letting her imagination create problems that probably didn't exist. She was vacuuming the upstairs hallway when she heard Mrs. Whitmore's voice from the master bedroom, sharp with irritation. "This can't continue much longer, James. The risks are increasing. I'm aware of the situation." The colonel's voice was calm, but firm. Maya had never heard him speak before, and his tone carried the kind of authority that came from years of command. "But we're too close to stop now. What if she talks? What if someone else finds out? She won't talk. She can't afford to." Maya moved the vacuum cleaner further down the hall, but she could still hear the conversation through the partially open bedroom door. "I don't like having the girl here," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "She's observant. Yesterday, I caught her listening near the library." Maya's blood ran cold. She hadn't realized she had been that obvious. "The girl is nobody," the colonel replied. "A poor kid who needs the job. As long as she does her work and stays out of restricted areas, she's not a problem." "But what if Catherine?" The colonel's voice cut through his wife's concerns with military precision. "We've come too far to let paranoia destroy everything we've built. The girl cleans house. That's all. Trust me to handle the rest." Maya heard footsteps approaching the bedroom door and quickly pushed the vacuum further down the hallway, her heart pounding. She forced herself to focus on her work, but her mind was racing. What situation were they talking about? Who was she who might talk? And what exactly had the Whitmores built that they were so afraid of losing? The morning passed without further incident. Mrs. Whitmore left for what she announced was a full day of errands, and the colonel remained in his off-limits office. Maya worked through her assigned rooms, but her attention kept drifting to the basement door. She had been explicitly told never to go downstairs, but Maya found herself studying the door whenever she passed it. It was solid wood, painted white to match the other doors in the house, but it had 2 locks instead of 1. The second lock looked newer, more industrial than the decorative brass hardware used elsewhere in the house. Maya was dusting the hallway table near the basement door when she heard it again, the sound of someone crying. This time she was certain it was real, and it was definitely coming from below. The crying was quiet, muffled, as if the person was trying not to be heard. Maya stood frozen, her dustcloth in her hand, listening. The crying continued for several minutes, then gradually faded to silence. Maya looked around the empty hallway, her conscience warring with her sense of self-preservation. She thought about her mother's medical bills, about Danny's need for new school clothes, about the opportunity this job represented. Then, she thought about the fear in that unknown woman's voice, about the tears she could hear through the floor beneath her feet. Maya made a decision that would change everything. She walked to the colonel's office and listened at the door. She could hear him speaking on the phone, his voice professional and measured. He seemed to be discussing some kind of business arrangement, mentioning numbers and timelines that meant nothing to Maya, but sounded important. Moving quietly, Maya returned to the basement door. She tried the handle, knowing it would be locked, but needing to confirm it. The door didn't budge. The locks were definitely engaged, and Maya had no way to get through them. But houses had secrets, and Maya had learned to notice details that others might miss. She spent the rest of the morning paying attention to the layout of the first floor, noting where various rooms lined up with the basement below. If there was another way down, she needed to find it. Her opportunity came during lunch. The colonel left the house, something Maya had never seen him do during her working hours. His departure was sudden. She heard him speaking urgently into his phone as he headed for the front door. Through the kitchen window, she watched him drive away in a black sedan that looked more like a government vehicle than a personal car. Maya knew she had maybe an hour before anyone returned. She also knew she was about to cross a line that might cost her the best job she had ever had. But the sound of crying had gotten under her skin, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. She began a systematic exploration of the first floor, looking for anything that might provide access to the basement. The house was large, with several rooms she had never been asked to clean. Most were unlocked, revealing storage spaces, a powder room, and what appeared to be a small office that wasn't part of the Colonel's main workspace. It was in the utility room, behind the washing machine, that Maya found what she was looking for, another door, partially concealed by the appliance's positioning. This door was smaller than the main basement entrance, and it had only one lock, an older mechanism that looked like it hadn't been changed in years. Maya examined the lock, wishing she had the skills to pick it. She was about to give up when she noticed that the door frame around the lock was slightly warped, as if the wood had swollen and shrunk over many seasons. She pushed against the door experimentally and felt it give slightly. Using her shoulder, Maya applied steady pressure to the door while turning the handle. The wood groaned, and suddenly the lock mechanism slipped. The door opened with a soft click. Maya found herself at the top of a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. She used her phone's flashlight to illuminate the steps, her heart pounding so hard she was sure someone must be able to hear it. The basement was larger than she had expected, extending under most of the house. But it wasn't the size that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. It was what she saw on the beam of her phone's light. The space had been divided into several rooms with makeshift walls. In one area, Maya could see what looked like a small kitchen and living space complete with a cot and basic furniture. In another section, there were filing cabinets, computers, and equipment she didn't recognize, but which looked expensive and sophisticated. And in the corner of the main room, huddled on a mattress behind a folding screen, was a young woman who couldn't have been much older than Maya herself. The woman looked up as Maya's light found her, her eyes wide with terror and something that might have been hope. She was pretty, with dark hair and features that suggested she might be Latina, though her accent when she had spoken upstairs had been different. She was wearing clothes that looked like they had once been nice, but were now wrinkled and stained. "Please," the woman whispered in English, though her accent was clear now. "Please, you have to help me." Maya approached carefully, her mind reeling. "Who are you? What are you doing down here?" "My name is Sophia. They brought me here. I can't leave." Tears began streaming down Sophia's face. "I thought I was coming to America for a job, for a better life. But they took my passport, my phone. They said I have to work for them until I pay back what they spent to bring me here." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Human trafficking. She had read about it, seen documentaries, but encountering it in the pristine Whitmore house felt surreal and horrifying. "How long have you been here?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 months. Maybe 4. I've lost track. Sophia's voice broke. "There are others. They move us sometimes to different houses. I don't know where the others are now." Maya's mind raced. She thought about the conversation she had overheard, the mysterious visitors, the emphasis on discretion. The Whitmores weren't just employers. They were criminals, running some kind of trafficking operation from their beautiful suburban home. "I'm going to help you," Maya said, though she had no idea how. "But I need to think. I need to figure out a safe way to get you out of here." "Be careful," Sophia warned. "The Colonel, he has connections everywhere. Police, government people. That's what they told me. They said even if I ran, they would find me, and it would be worse." Maya heard footsteps above her head and froze. Someone had returned to the house. "I have to go," she whispered. "But I'll be back. I promise." Maya made her way back up the narrow stairs, her hands shaking as she closed the door behind her and repositioned the washing machine. She had just resumed her normal cleaning routine when Mrs. Whitmore entered the kitchen. "How is your day going?" Mrs. Whitmore asked, her tone pleasant, but her eyes sharp as they studied Maya's face. "Very well, ma'am. I'm just finishing up the downstairs rooms." "Good. I trust you're finding everything you need? No areas of the house you're curious about?" The question felt like a trap, but Maya managed to keep her expression neutral. "No, ma'am. You've been very clear about my responsibilities." Mrs. Whitmore smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Excellent. I do appreciate employees who understand boundaries." As Maya continued her work for the rest of the day, her mind churned with the implications of what she had discovered. She was trapped in an impossible situation. She had evidence of a serious crime, but the perpetrators were wealthy, well-connected, and clearly dangerous. Going to the police felt risky, especially if the colonel really did have law enforcement contacts. But she couldn't leave Sophia in that basement, and she couldn't pretend she had never seen what she had seen. Maya finished her workday in a daze, her responses to Mrs. Whitmore's final inspection automatic and polite. As she changed out of her uniform, she made another decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She was going to find a way to save Sophia, even if it meant risking everything she had worked for. She just had to figure out how to do it without getting them both killed in the process. The bus ride home felt endless, Maya's mind spinning with half-formed plans and worst-case scenarios. She had stumbled into something much bigger and more dangerous than a simple housekeeping job, and there was no going back to the comfortable ignorance she had maintained for her first 2 weeks. Maya stared out the bus window at the passing city streets, knowing that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. Tomorrow she would have to return to the Whitmore house, pretend she knew nothing, and somehow find a way to help a girl she barely knew escape from people who had the power to destroy them both. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a physical burden, but Maya also felt something else, a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she had the chance to make a real difference, to be the kind of person who didn't walk away when someone needed help. She just hoped she could figure out how to do it before it was too late. Maya spent the weekend in a state of barely controlled panic. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sophia's terrified face, heard her desperate whisper pleading for help. Maya had never felt so powerless in her life, knowing that somewhere across the city, a girl not much older than herself was trapped in a basement, waiting for rescue that might never come. She researched everything she could find about human trafficking, using the computers at the public library to avoid leaving any digital trail at home. The statistics were staggering and terrifying. Thousands of people, many of them young women, disappeared into trafficking networks every year. The operations were sophisticated, often involving multiple locations, and corrupt officials who made rescue attempts dangerous for everyone involved. Maya also researched Colonel James Whitmore, though information about him was surprisingly limited. She found basic military service records showing a distinguished career in Army intelligence, including deployments to Eastern Europe and Central America. After his retirement 5 years ago, the trail went cold. There were no social media profiles, no business registrations in his name, nothing that indicated what he might be doing now. By Monday morning, Maya had made several decisions. First, she would gather as much evidence as possible before taking any action. Second, she would try to learn more about the scope of the operation, how many people might be involved, and where other victims might be held. Third, she would identify trustworthy authorities who could help without alerting the colonel's alleged contacts in law enforcement. Returning to the Whitmore house felt like walking into enemy territory. Maya forced herself to maintain her usual routine, greeting Mrs. Whitmore politely and beginning her cleaning duties as if nothing had changed. But every sound made her jump, and she found herself studying her employers' faces for signs that they suspected her discovery. The colonel was home that morning, which was unusual. Maya could hear him moving around his office, and at one point she glimpsed him through the kitchen window, speaking intensely on his cell phone while pacing in the back garden. Even from a distance, his body language radiated tension and anger. Maya worked quickly through the upstairs rooms, her heart racing every time she passed near the basement door. She was cleaning the guest bathroom when she heard voices from the first floor. Mrs. Whitmore speaking to someone Maya didn't recognize. "The situation is becoming unstable," a man's voice said. We may need to accelerate the timeline. That's not possible, Mrs. Whitmore replied. We have commitments to fulfill. Buyers who were expecting delivery. Maya's blood ran cold. Buyers. They were talking about selling people like merchandise. Then, we increase security, the man continued. Add more surveillance, tighten protocols. We can't afford any complications now. Maya ducked into the guest bedroom, her mind racing. If they were increasing security, it would become much harder to help Sophia escape. She needed to act soon, but she still had no concrete plan. The conversation downstairs ended with the visitor leaving through the front door. Maya resumed her cleaning, but her hands shook as she dusted the furniture. She was in over her head, dealing with people who clearly had no regard for human life or dignity. During her lunch break, while Mrs. Whitmore was away at another social engagement, Maya made her way back to the basement. The hidden door opened more easily this time, as if her previous visit had loosened the warped wood. Sophia was exactly where Maya had left her, curled up on the mattress behind the folding screen. She looked up hopefully when Maya's light found her, then began to cry with relief. I thought maybe I had imagined you, Sophia whispered. I thought maybe I was going crazy. Maya knelt beside the mattress, her heart breaking at the sight of Sophia's condition. The young woman was thin, clearly not getting enough food, and her eyes held the hollow look of someone who had experienced trauma beyond her years. Tell me everything, Maya said quietly. How did you get here? Who else is involved? Sophia's story came out in fragments, interrupted by tears and moments when fear made her voice catch. She had been recruited in her home country of Moldova by a woman who promised her a job as a nanny for a wealthy American family. The job offer included travel expenses, housing, and a salary that seemed too good to be true. It had been too good to be true. When Sophia arrived in the United States, her passport was immediately confiscated for safekeeping. Instead of being taken to a family's home, she was brought to a warehouse where she met other young women who had been recruited with similar promises. They were told they owed thousands of dollars for their transportation, housing, and food, and that they would need to work to pay off this debt. The work wasn't childcare or housekeeping in the traditional sense. Sophia's voice dropped to barely a whisper as she described being forced to provide entertainment for the colonel's business associates, men who paid large sums for companionship that often turned violent and degrading. There are other houses, Sophia explained. They move us around so we never know where we are, never have a chance to learn the area, or make connections. Sometimes girls disappear completely. They say they've been sold to buyers overseas, but we never know if that's true. Maya listened in growing horror and rage. These weren't just criminals. They were monsters, treating human beings like property to be used and discarded at will. How many girls are there? Maya asked. I don't know exactly. At the warehouse, I counted maybe 15. But there are multiple operations, multiple houses. The colonel, he's not the only one. There's a whole network. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message alert, making both young women jump. It was a message from her mother, asking when she would be home for dinner. The normalcy of the message felt surreal given their current conversation. I have to go, Maya whispered. But I'm working on a plan. I'm going to get you out of here. Sophia grabbed Maya's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Be careful. The colonel, he has connections everywhere. Government people, police, judges. That's what they tell us. They say even if we escape, even if we go to the authorities, nothing will happen to them, and we'll disappear forever. As Maya made her way back upstairs, Sophia's warnings echoed in her mind. The corruption apparently went deep, which meant she couldn't trust conventional law enforcement. But Maya had an idea, inspired by something she had seen on the news. That evening, Maya told her family she was going to study at the library. Instead, she went to an internet cafe in a part of town she didn't usually visit, paying cash to use a computer terminal. She spent 2 hours researching federal agencies that dealt with human trafficking, looking for contact information that couldn't be traced back to local law enforcement. The FBI had a dedicated human trafficking task force with a tip line that promised confidentiality for informants. Maya also found information about an organization called Polaris Project, which operated the National Human Trafficking Hotline and had resources for victims and witnesses. But as Maya read about the complexities of trafficking investigations, she realized that even federal intervention could take weeks or months to develop. Sophia didn't have weeks or months. Based on conversations Maya had overheard, something was about to happen soon, possibly involving moving the girls to different locations or worse. Maya needed help from someone she could trust completely, someone who wasn't part of any official system that might have been compromised. As she walked home from the internet cafe, an idea began to form. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was a retired social worker who had spent her career helping at-risk youth. She had always been kind to Maya and Danny, offering tutoring help and sometimes bringing them home-cooked meals when their mother was too sick to cook. More importantly, Mrs. Patterson had mentioned that her son was a federal prosecutor who specialized in organized crime cases. It was a long shot, but it was better than trying to handle this alone. The next morning at work, Maya paid closer attention to the Whitmore house's security measures. She noted the locations of all the windows and doors, identified which ones had alarm sensors, and observed the routine of when alarms were set and disarmed. If she was going to help Sophia escape, she needed to understand every obstacle they might face. She also began documenting everything she could safely photograph with her phone: license plates of visiting vehicles, faces of people who came to the house, and anything else that might serve as evidence. Maya was careful to delete the photos from her phone each evening, transferring them to a thumb drive she kept hidden in her backpack. The tension in the household was increasing daily. Mrs. Whitmore snapped at Maya over minor issues, and the Colonel's phone conversations grew more heated. Maya overheard fragments of discussions about product delivery, security breaches, and cleaning house that made her blood run cold. On Wednesday afternoon, while cleaning the Colonel's study, Maya overheard a phone conversation that made her realize time was running out. "The operation needs to be mobile by Friday," the Colonel was saying. "All assets relocated to the secondary locations. We can't risk exposure at this point." Friday. That was only 2 days away. Maya finished her work in a daze, her mind racing through possibilities. She had to act immediately, but she still didn't have a solid plan. How could she get Sophia out of a locked basement without alerting the entire household? How could she ensure Sophia's safety once they escaped? And how could she make sure the other victims in the network were saved as well? That evening, Maya made another decision that terrified her. She knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door, her palms sweating and her heart pounding. "Maya, honey, what a nice surprise," Mrs. Patterson said, opening the door with a warm smile. "Come in, come in." The older woman's living room was warm and comfortable, filled with family photos and the smell of baking cookies. Maya had been here many times over the years, but tonight it felt like a sanctuary. "Mrs. Patterson," Maya began, her voice shaking slightly, "I need to ask you about something very serious, and I need to know that you'll keep it confidential." Mrs. Patterson's expression grew concerned. "Of course, dear. What's wrong?" Maya took a deep breath and began to tell her story. She left out some of the more dangerous details, focusing on the fact that she had discovered evidence of human trafficking and needed to connect with trustworthy federal authorities. Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, her face growing more grave with each revelation. "My God," Mrs. Patterson whispered when Maya finished. "Maya, this is incredibly dangerous. These people won't hesitate to hurt you if they think you're a threat." "I know, but I can't just walk away. There's a girl down there who's counting on me, and there are others." Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to her desk. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Maya. "This is my son David's direct number. He's with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he's worked on trafficking cases before. He can connect you with the right people, people you can trust. But, Maya, you need to be very careful. Don't try to rescue anyone on your own. These operations are more dangerous than you can imagine." Maya looked at the business card, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. She was about to cross a line that would put her in direct conflict with powerful, dangerous people. But she had no choice. "Thank you," she said to Mrs. Patterson. "And please don't tell anyone about this." "Not yet. I won't. But promise me you'll call David tonight." "Don't wait," Maya promised, though privately she knew she couldn't wait for federal authorities to develop a plan. Sophia would be moved in 2 days, possibly to a location where Maya would never be able to find her again. As Maya walked back to her own apartment, she made a final decision. Tomorrow, she would call David Patterson and set the federal investigation in motion. But she would also attempt to rescue Sophia herself before the trafficking network could relocate her. It was a desperate plan with a low probability of success and a high likelihood of getting both of them killed. But it was the only plan Maya had, and time was running out. She spent that night writing letters to her mother and Danny, explaining what had happened and why she had made the choices she had made. She also wrote down everything she knew about the trafficking operation, including the names and descriptions of everyone she had seen at the Whitmore house. If something happened to her, at least there would be a record of what she had discovered. Maya sealed the letters in an envelope and hid it under her mattress, then lay awake until dawn, running through every possible scenario for the next day. By the time her alarm went off, she had accepted that she might not survive the next 24 hours. But she also knew that she couldn't live with herself if she didn't try. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that seemed to seep into everything. Maya dressed carefully in layers, knowing she might need to move quickly and quietly later. She packed a small emergency kit in her backpack: energy bars, water bottles, a first aid kit, and cash she'd been saving for her mother's medications. Before leaving for work, Maya called David Patterson from a payphone 3 blocks from her apartment building. The conversation was brief and intense. "This is extremely dangerous," he told her after she explained the situation. "I can have a federal task force at that house within 6 hours, but you need to stay completely clear of the situation until then." "They're moving everyone tomorrow," Maya explained. "If we wait 6 hours, she'll be gone. Then we'll find her wherever they take her." "Maya, these people are professionals. They've killed to protect their operations before. Promise me you won't try anything on your own." Maya promised, knowing she was lying. She hung up the phone feeling both relief and guilt. Help was coming, but it wouldn't arrive in time for Sophia. The Whitmore house buzzed with unusual activity when Maya arrived. There were 2 unfamiliar cars in the driveway, and she could hear multiple voices from the colonel's office. Mrs. Whitmore was clearly agitated, snapping orders into her phone about timetables and transportation arrangements. Maya began her cleaning routine, but every sense was hyper-alert. She needed to understand what was happening, when it was happening, and how she could use the chaos to her advantage. The opportunity came during lunch, when most of the activity moved to the basement. Maya could hear footsteps and muffled voices below her feet as she sat in the kitchen, pretending to eat her sandwich. It sounded like they were moving equipment and possibly preparing to relocate the victims. Maya made her way to the bathroom near the colonel's office, where she could hear fragments of conversation through the ventilation system. "Transportation arrives at midnight," someone was saying. "Everything needs to be ready for immediate departure." "What about loose ends?" That was the colonel's voice. "Already being handled. The cleaning crew will take care of any traces." Maya's blood ran cold. Cleaning crew sounded like a euphemism for something much more sinister. They weren't just planning to move the operation. They were planning to eliminate any evidence and possibly any witnesses. Maya realized with growing horror that Sophia and any other victims in the house might not survive the relocation. The trafficking network was preparing to disappear completely, which meant anyone who could identify them was a liability. The afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Maya completed her assigned tasks while mentally rehearsing her rescue plan. She had identified the best route from the basement to the house's rear exit, which led to an alley where she could potentially hide a car. She had also located the main electrical panel in the utility room, in case she needed to cut power to the house. The biggest challenge would be getting Sophia out without alerting anyone upstairs. The basement had cement floors that would echo footsteps, and the main staircase creaked in several places. Maya's only advantage was that most of the activity seemed focused on the colonel's office and the front of the house. As the workday neared its end, Maya made her move. She approached Mrs. Whitmore, who was organizing papers in the kitchen. "Ma'am, I'm feeling quite sick," Maya said, pressing her hand to her stomach. "I think it might be food poisoning. Would it be possible for me to leave a little early today?" Mrs. Whitmore looked annoyed, but nodded. "Fine, but I expect you here bright and early tomorrow morning. We have important guests arriving, and everything needs to be perfect." Maya doubted she would be alive to clean house tomorrow morning, but she simply nodded and gathered her things. As she left through the front door, she made a show of walking toward the bus stop. But instead of boarding the bus, Maya circled around the block and approached the Whitmore house from the rear. The back alley was narrow and poorly lit, lined with garbage cans and overgrown bushes that provided excellent cover. Maya found a position where she could observe the house while remaining hidden. She settled in to wait, knowing that her window of opportunity would come after dark when most of the household activity died down. The hours crawled by. Maya watched the house through the growing darkness, noting the patterns of light in different windows, the comings and goings of various people, and the gradual quieting of activity as evening approached. Around 10 o'clock, most of the lights on the first floor went out, leaving only a few glowing windows upstairs. Maya gave herself a final pep talk as she prepared to enter the house. She was about to commit multiple felonies, including breaking and entering, and she was putting herself in mortal danger. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered Sophia's terrified face and her desperate plea for help. Using skills she had learned from a childhood spent navigating urban environments, Maya approached the house from the side where the shadows were deepest. She had identified a window in the utility room that was partially concealed by an air conditioning unit and hadn't been wired to the security system. The window was locked, but the mechanism was old and gave way after several minutes of careful pressure. Maya slipped through the opening, landing silently on the utility room floor. Her heart was beating so loudly she was certain someone would hear it. The house was eerily quiet, with only the distant hum of appliances and the occasional settling creak of old wood. Maya made her way to the hidden basement entrance, moving slowly and testing each floorboard before putting her full weight on it. The basement door opened more easily than ever, as if the wood had finally given up its resistance. Maya descended the narrow stairs, using her phone's flashlight set to its dimmest setting to navigate the darkness. Sophia was awake when Maya reached the basement, sitting up on her mattress with her knees drawn to her chest. Her face showed a mixture of hope and terror when she recognized Maya. "You came back," Sophia whispered. "I'm getting you out of here," Maya said quietly. "Tonight. Right now." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "They said tomorrow I'm being moved. Far away. They said." Her voice broke. "They said this time I might not survive the journey." Maya's resolve hardened. "That's not going to happen. Can you walk? Are you hurt?" "I am okay. Weak, but okay." Maya helped Sophia to her feet, noting how thin she had become. "We're going out through the back of the house. There's an alley where I can get us transportation. But we have to move quickly and quietly." As they started toward the stairs, Maya heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps on the floor above, moving purposefully toward the basement door. Someone was coming downstairs. Maya grabbed Sophia's arm and pulled her behind a large piece of equipment in the far corner of the basement. They crouched in the shadows just as a light appeared at the top of the stairs. Two men descended into the basement, one of them carrying a flashlight that swept across the room. Maya recognized one of the voices as belonging to the colonel. "Get everything loaded," he was saying to his companion. "I want this place completely clean before midnight." The men moved around the basement, gathering files and equipment. Maya held her breath, praying they wouldn't check behind the machinery where she and Sophia were hidden. "What about the girl?" the other man asked. "She goes with the others." The buyer specifically requested her type. Maya felt Sophia tremble beside her. They were talking about selling her like livestock, and from the context, it sounded like a one-way transaction. The men continued their work for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, they headed back upstairs, their voices fading as they moved away from the basement entrance. Maya waited several more minutes before emerging from their hiding place. The basement felt different now, emptier, as if the life was being drained out of it in preparation for abandonment. "Now," Maya whispered. "We go now." They moved quickly but carefully up the narrow stairs. The utility room was still empty, and Maya could hear voices from the front of the house, suggesting that the activity was focused away from their escape route. Maya helped Sophia through the utility room window, then followed her into the dark alley. The cold night air hit them like a physical slap, but it also felt like freedom. "This way," Maya whispered, leading Sophia toward the mouth of the alley where she had hidden her mother's old car earlier that evening. Maya had borrowed the vehicle without permission, knowing her mother would understand when she learned the full story. They had almost reached the car when Maya heard shouts from the house behind them. Someone had discovered that Sophia was missing. "Run," Maya said, abandoning stealth for speed. They reached the car just as lights began appearing in the house windows. Maya fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The engine turned over on the second try, and they pulled out of the alley just as the front door of the Whitmore house burst open. Maya drove through the residential streets as quickly as she dared, taking a circuitous route toward downtown to make sure they weren't being followed. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe it," Sophia kept repeating. "I can't believe I'm free." Maya's first stop was the police station, but not the local precinct. She drove to the federal building downtown, where David Patterson had told her FBI agents would be waiting. As they pulled into the parking garage, Maya saw several unmarked cars and men in suits who looked like federal agents. The next few hours passed in a blur of interviews, statements, and medical examinations for Sophia. Maya told her story repeatedly to different agents, providing every detail she could remember about the Whitmore house, the people she had seen, and the conversations she had overheard. David Patterson arrived around 3 in the morning, bringing coffee and reassurance that Maya had done the right thing. "The task force raided the house an hour ago," he told her. "The Whitmores and several associates are in custody. They also found evidence linking them to trafficking operations in 5 other cities." "What about the other victims?" Maya asked. "They're working on that. Your information about the network structure is helping them locate other sites. There will probably be coordinated raids over the next few days." As dawn broke over the city, Maya finally allowed herself to believe that it was over. Sophia was safe, the trafficking ring was being dismantled, and justice was finally being served. The aftermath was complex and sometimes difficult. Maya's testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case, which meant months of preparation and eventually a trial that put her face in newspapers and on television. The Whitmores and their associates received long federal prison sentences, and the investigation led to the rescue of dozens of other trafficking victims. Maya lost her job, of course, but she gained something much more valuable: the knowledge that she had made a difference in the world. The federal government provided financial assistance for her family during the legal proceedings, and several organizations offered her scholarships to continue her education. Sophia was granted special victim status and eventually became a U.S. citizen. She and Maya remained close friends, bonding over the shared trauma and triumph of their experience. Sophia went on to become an advocate for trafficking victims, working with law enforcement to identify and rescue others trapped in similar situations. 6 months after the rescue, Maya received a letter that surprised her. It was from Colonel Whitmore, writing from federal prison. In it, he acknowledged that Maya had shown more courage and integrity than he had demonstrated in his entire military career. He also provided additional information about trafficking networks that helped authorities close several more operations. Maya never responded to the letter, but she kept it as a reminder that even people who do terrible things can sometimes recognize the difference between right and wrong. The experience changed Maya in fundamental ways. She went back to school, eventually studying criminal justice and social work. Her goal was to build a career helping vulnerable people navigate systems that often failed them. She also learned important lessons about the power of individual action. One person, even someone as young and powerless as she had felt at the time, could make an enormous difference in the world. The key was recognizing when action was needed and having the courage to act, even when the risks seemed overwhelming. Years later, when Maya spoke to students about her experience, she always emphasized that heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. "I was terrified every day I worked in that house," she would tell them. "But I was more afraid of living with myself if I walked away from someone who needed help." Maya's story became part of training materials used by law enforcement agencies to educate officers about human trafficking indicators. Her description of the seemingly perfect suburban house hiding a criminal enterprise helped investigators recognize that trafficking operations could exist anywhere, camouflaged behind facades of respectability and wealth. The Black Viper case, as the media dubbed it after the colonel's military call sign, became a landmark prosecution that changed how federal authorities approached trafficking investigations. It demonstrated the importance of protecting witnesses and victims, and it showed that ordinary citizens could play crucial roles in exposing criminal networks. For Maya, the most important outcome wasn't the media attention or the legal precedents. It was the knowledge that Sophia was alive, free, and building a new life in America. It was the letter she received from other trafficking survivors who had been inspired by her story to seek help or speak out against their captors. Every time Maya walked past a house like the Whitmores, she remembered that appearances could be deceiving, that evil often hid behind beautiful facades, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought by the people society considered least important. She had learned that recognition and power weren't always necessary to make a difference. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to listen, to see what others missed, and to act when action was needed. Maya had started as a girl, trying to earn money to help her sick mother. She had ended as a woman who understood that her own struggles had prepared her to recognize and respond to the struggles of others. The colonel had been wrong about one thing. Maya wasn't nobody. She was exactly the right person to be in the right place at the right time, with the right combination of desperation and determination to change everything. In the end, they hadn't recognized her importance because they had never learned to see past their own privilege and prejudice. But Maya had learned something far more valuable. She had learned to recognize herself.